Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
The husband decided to reveal all the cards about his friend's wife, but not in the usual way. Today's story has a similar plot. Enjoy it! My name is Melinda Carson. For some reason, my friends just call me Linda. My dad calls me Keith, and wait a second, I need to do something. Shut up, Mom. If you don't stop this damn crying right now, I'll have the doorman escort you out of here. This is a happy occasion. Haven't you noticed that everyone here is smiling? I hissed at the woman sitting just inches from where I was standing. But this shouldn't happen, she whined through tears. She looked to me for sympathy and found none. Mom, everyone in town is here and having a great time. You, more than anyone else in town, are responsible for this and for the party that comes next. So deal with it and try to enjoy it, I hissed again. Luckily for me, my voice doesn't carry far. I just smile and wave to the 2 or 3 people who noticed our conversation. Everyone else's eyes are focused on the back of the church. Anyway, as I was about to say, my dad. Dad is the only person who can get away with calling me Keith. Damn, I lost my train of thought. I have no idea what I was going to tell you. Okay, I think the story is over. No, you won't get off that easy, but since I don't remember where I was, I should probably start from the beginning. About a year ago, I walked into my house after school. I had to choose an outfit to wear to the school's harvest dance. The harvest festival was a big deal because it was the only outdoor dinner and dance we had. We live in California, and our weather is moderate. We don't see the wild storms that happen along the coast in the fall, and we don't see the landslides that happen near the mountains. We are lucky that in October and November, the temperatures are still mild enough to enjoy dancing outside. The evening air is a little chilly, but a light jacket or cape is sufficient. I needed the right outfit. Even though I'm not a cheerleader, I am quite popular, so I need to make a good impression. I don't have to worry about getting a date or impressing anyone because I've had the same guy since sophomore year. Considering he's a preacher's kid, he's very moral. We focus more on entertainment than intim. My goal, which my mother had drilled into me since I was old enough to understand, was for me to walk down the aisle a virgin, but for my husband to wake up tired the day after the wedding. I intended to do something more. I was going to make Dean wake up scared. Part of the reason for my popularity is my brain. I participated in the National Honor Society every year in high school, and with the exception of my freshman year, I maintained a 4.0 GPA. In my first year, I got a C in physical education. I've never been very athletic. That year, as usual, my dad came to my aid. In the summer, he made me run with him every morning. When I went back to school, all the stupid things I had to do to get an A became very easy after our run. My dad and I worked on the machines in his home gym. Unbeknownst to me, my body changed over that summer. I became much stronger but also lost weight in some key areas. I think it was the bench presses, but my breasts got bigger over the summer. Not only did my skinny legs get bigger, but they also took on a better shape. And the changes weren't just cosmetic, I was much stronger and much more coordinated. The first day at the gym was the day I dreaded. It was the day they made assessments. The assessments were designed to see where you rank on the National Fitness Scale. It was based on how many push-ups, squats, and pull-ups you could do. There was also a rope climb and, finally, a mile run. It usually took us the first week of school to get everyone tested. I did terribly my freshman year, and when the school reassessed last week, I had to demonstrate a significant improvement in my fitness. And I did. That's why they gave me a C. My father looked at my report card and didn't say a word. He just hugged me and told me he was proud of me. I thought he would be a little upset, but he clearly wasn't. When we started running together, he simply suggested it to us as a fun way to spend more time together. And being a daddy's girl, I was all for it. He was very thin. We slowly increased the distance and duration of the races. We talked as we ran, laughed, and joked. I could tell my father anything. When he started talking after a run one day about us going on vacation, I followed him to the gym, and it seemed natural to start doing curls with him. In fact, it took me a while to realize that he had planned this. There was already a dumbbell with very light weights next to his heavier bell. Before I knew it, I had an entire training session with him, and we would go out or just have breakfast together before starting the day. He didn't attach much importance to it. It's not that I was ever overweight, I was just out of shape, and he gently pushed me to become more toned. The first thing I noticed when I returned to school after that summer was that there were a lot of people, both men and women, looking at me in my sports uniform. "What the hell happened to you this summer?" asked Becky Thatcher. Becky has been my best friend since birth and lives around the corner from me. Since both my parents liked her work, we met in kindergarten. "Did you take supermodel classes or something?" she asked. "Do you have implants?" "No," I smiled. "Damn it, what did you do?" she asked. "I was just spending time with Dad," I said, "but I did highlight and lighten my hair." "Maybe that's it." Last year, I was able to do 8 women's push-ups and 20 squats. After that, I almost felt sick. I continued to talk to Becky during my approach. I did 25 push-ups and noticed everyone was looking at me. As I moved on to the next exercise, to do squats, the physical education teacher ran up to me and asked, "Who are you?" Even Becky was looking at me. "Linda, you did 25 push-ups," she said, perplexed. I should have been quiet while I was making them, I said. "Perhaps I could do more." "Linda, you did push-ups the men's way," she said. "Apart from the athletes and some fans, no one even came close to your result." Before the time was up, the teacher told me to stop doing squats. "You only had to do 50 to reach the maximum on the scale," he said. Last year, I couldn't do a single pull-up. I had to do what they called a hang. In a hang, you pull yourself up and hang there, keeping your chin over the bar for as long as you can. They had to lift me into place because I couldn't pull myself up. I was only able to hang for about 2 seconds. This year, I went right after Big Mill. Big Milburndale was the center forward of our football team. Big Mill weighed over 200 pounds in high school. All that weight made it difficult for him to do pull-ups, but he was strong as a bull and did 11 pull-ups. I jumped on the bar and did 12. When my feet touched the floor, a muffled sigh was heard in the gym. My dad made me do several sets of pull-ups with a weight belt around my waist. Our reward system gave me a donut or treat every time I beat my previous score. The second and third approaches were the most difficult. I was used to doing 8 pull-ups with 25 pounds strapped around my waist. Doing just one set of 12 without additional weight was hardly a challenge. It was the end of the first day of physical education class. Everyone was already talking about me. Boys who had never paid me any attention before were now hovering around us. Becky liked the attention. We were still sitting at the table with the same people we always were with. I already knew what I wanted to do with my life, so being around smart people was a good idea. I like to think that I never changed throughout high school, but in my second year, the way other people saw me changed. This happened last year in my last year of study. Like I said, I was trying to find the perfect outfit and got home early. My English teacher was sick, and there was no substitute. Since English was my last lesson, we were released early. As I walked through the house, I heard the sounds coming from my parents' bedroom. I did not think about that. I was 18 years old. I knew what intimate was, although I had never had it. I knew it would be good for my parents, and I didn't blame them for it. I knocked on their door and told them that when they finished, I needed help with something. My mom always gave me fashion advice. My dad always gave me a man's opinion about how I looked. "Dad, where's Mustang?" I asked. My father never went anywhere without this car, and he never put it on display in the store without complaining to me about how much he would miss it. Suddenly, my memory went haywire. I remembered hearing my mother's voice but not my father's. I pushed the door open and was overcome with rage. I saw my mother hurriedly trying to get dressed and the principal of my high school pulling up his pants. "You're a damn traitor!" I screamed at my mother. "And you, Mr. Eddington, my father will kick your 5th place when all this is cleared up. You will be looking for a new job." I slammed the door and ran out of the house. I hadn't even walked a block when my phone started ringing. I looked at the display and saw that it was my mother. I pressed the answer button and immediately hung up. I went to Becky's house. I hung out with Becky that day and stayed with her until I was sure my dad was home. As I walked up the driveway, I saw his Mustang, large chrome exhaust pipes, chrome wheels, and racing stripes made the car look much more sinister than it actually was. I think we all see things differently. My dad looked at the car and saw beauty. I looked at it, and it just looked angry with blades and scoops and wings, and the sound it made, that car was damn loud. But for my father, the sound of those pipes was like music. I used my key and entered the door. My mother immediately became nervous. "Hey, Keith," my father said, smiling. He came over and hugged me like he always did. My father squeezed me so tightly that I could feel the love oozing out of him. "Are you okay, kitten?" he asked. "It's been a hard day, Dad," I began. "You know how you go through life thinking you can count on certain people, and they just turn out to be full of it?" Mom turned pale at my words. "Melinda, may I?" she began. I turned my head sharply and looked at her intently. My father didn't notice the exchange. "Dad, we need to talk about something," I said. "Of course, Keith," he said. "Do you want to wait until after dinner, or should we do it now?" "It's okay after dinner, Daddy," I said. My father always looked at things from the outside. No matter what the problem was, he made me feel safe. Other people also treated him the same way. My father was an automobile engineer. He solved problems for a living. He just knew how to look at things from a different angle. "Great," he said. "I want to install my own tuner on my car. I think I'll have to tone down the power and throttle response a bit. My gas mileage has never been great, but now it really sucks." "You go play with your car, dear," Mom said. "Melinda and I will prepare dinner." She grabbed my hand and pulled me into the kitchen. After she kissed my dad, just seeing her touch his lips made me feel sick. After everything I'd seen. "Melinda, dear," she began. "I know you're supposed to be my mother, but get your damn hands off me right now," I hissed. "Melinda, you have to let me explain," she said. "Explain what?" I snorted. "You've been telling me nothing but nonsense all your life. You and Dad have always been like switches. Dad always told me that I can do anything I want. If I wanted to be on the student council, he said, go for it. You said that a lot of people are running, but only 6 are chosen, so the chances are slim," I said. "You said I shouldn't run for prom queen because she always gets picked from the cheerleaders." My dad gave me a necklace that said I was his prom queen before the election started. When I won, he asked me if I had ever doubted. "You were shocked. You never believed in me, Mom. You constantly tell me what not to do. You filled my head with everything I can't do or shouldn't do." "Melinda, your skirt is too short," Melinda said. "Good girls don't do that, Melinda. People will think you're if you wear this." When I decided to take pre-law in college because I decided to become a prosecutor and help bring criminals who hurt other people to justice, what did you tell me? You said, "Melinda, this is not what a girl should do. It seems all you ever wanted was to pour cold water on my dreams." "Mom, watch your language, young lady," she said. "I'm still yours." "What's yours?" I asked. "Are you still my shining example of what a woman should be?" "I don't think you are, unless every woman has to be a cheater. Dad deserves someone who loves him and is loyal to him." "Oh, wait. Isn't this the same nonsense you told me once I started thinking about boys? If you can't walk that path, maybe you shouldn't even talk about it." "But, Melinda, I love your father. It was just an oversight. I made one mistake. I'm human too. Please, give me one more chance. This won't happen again," she wailed. "Mom, mistakes happen suddenly or when you're drunk. This was intentional and has likely happened before. It's no accident that you bring a man home and sleep with him in my father's bed. You also work with him every day. He is also married and has small children at home. You destroyed 2 families because you made one mistake." "Melinda, I'm so sorry," she said. "Please don't do this. This will hurt your father and tear our family apart needlessly. You just said it. Why destroy 2 families to punish me? Do you want your father to get hurt? Pick up that damn phone call and tell him you're quitting right now. Find another job somewhere else if you have to. But if you go back to school for any reason, I'll tell Dad immediately. Give me your cell phone. If this calls you, you know what will happen. And from now on, don't talk to me. Period. As far as I understand, you died today. I am an orphan. I want you to convince my dad to sleep in the guest room tonight and don't have an intimate with him tomorrow. I want you to buy a new bed and burn it. Tell him it's infested with bed bugs or something like that. I don't care what it is, but you better make it happen. But, Melinda, your father will notice if we don't act the same as always. And it's your senior year. A lot of things will happen to you. Soon, there will be times when you need a woman's opinion or advice. I know you're a daddy's girl, always have been, but you need your mom too, she said. I will find someone I can trust and look up to fill this role, I hissed. Remember what I said. I turned and left the kitchen. I went and took her purse and handed it to her. Melinda, can I call him on the phone? She asked. No, because I have your phone. Give it back, I said. She gave me her sleek iPhone. I have to get you to call him at home, I said, so his wife will probably answer the phone, and you will have to ask her if you can talk to him. You'll have to listen to the sounds of his children playing in the background. Maybe it will make you realize how terrible you are. Melinda, do you have to use that kind of language? She asked in a whiny tone. Yes, Teresa, I said. You once told me that being a lady is not just knowing how to curtsy and use the right fork. Being a lady means acting and speaking appropriately for the situation. Do you remember this? She nodded her head. Well, when I'm with a person who has no morals, no class, and the nerve to cheat on someone who loves her very much, that's the language that suits the situation. Besides, you and I will not talk from now on. A lot will happen, and once I leave for college next fall, the only time we'll see each other is when I'm home visiting my dad. I have one more request for you, Mom, I said. She looked at me pleadingly. This is for the future. From now on, whenever a big event happens in my life, I want you to be sick, injured, or simply unavailable. This means I don't want you to attend my graduation. I don't want you at my college graduation either. I don't want you at my wedding, and if I ever have children, I don't expect you to be there. All clear? I asked. She nodded. Call him. She picked up her home phone and dialed Eddington's number. I'll have to quit my job, she said. At the moment, you need another secretary. I won't be back at all. Have someone pack my personal items and send them to me. That someone will not be you. Mail my latest check or deposit it directly, Dawn. Don't call me again, or Melinda will tell my husband and your family goodbye. Well done, Teresa, I said. It was painful. What hurts? She asked. Tell your lover that you can't see each other anymore, I asked. Does this tug at the heartstrings? Do you feel that emptiness in your stomach? No, Melinda, she said sadly. I don't like Russell. I love only your father. Russell was just. Shut up, I snorted. If you loved my dad, you wouldn't. Melinda, you are very young now, she said. One day, you will understand. I hope I never understand anything the way you see it, I said sharply. I will never understand how a woman who is married to a man who loves her completely can cheat on him with someone like Mr. Eddington. Do you even know half the rumors about him? I mean, you're obviously stupid, but are you that stupid, Mom? You are far from the first woman, or even the first woman in our school, with whom he started an affair. You're just the last one. I bet he can find someone else to please in less than a week. I put her phone in my pocket and left the room. I went to the garage to look at Dad. He opened the hood of his Mustang and plugged his tuner into the port on the engine. His new tuner could transmit information wirelessly to his iPad. The men were like little boys with their toys. With age, toys only became more complex and expensive. 3 of our neighbors also gathered around, looking under the hood of Dad's car. When I walked up and started looking, he saw me and smiled. Is supper ready? He asked. No, Dad, I said. Do not rush. As much as a grown man can be naive, my dad was. He seemed happy. He loved his life. When he joked and talked with our neighbors, I felt so embarrassed that I even thought about depriving him of this happiness. He worked so hard to give us a good life. Mom only started working a couple of years ago when I was old enough to look after myself. She had no secretarial skills and became a volunteer at my high school. She eventually began receiving a salary as she took on more responsibilities, eventually becoming Eddington's secretary. Then, I decided not for the sake of Mom or Eddington, but for the sake of Dad's happiness, not to say anything. I wasn't sure it was the right decision, but at the time, it seemed like the right choice. When I arrived at school the next day, everything started out great. About halfway through the first period, I was called into the principal's office. My wonderful day began to go to hell. I opened the door to Eddington's office. There was no secretary there because my mother quit. "Come in and close the door, Melinda," he said. "I would prefer to leave it open," I told him. "Well, can you just cover for her?" he asked. "What we need to talk about must remain confidential." "There's nothing to talk about between us," I said. "Melinda, what about your future?" he said. "The colleges you applied to will still be interested in your grades. If your GPA suddenly drops, you may lose several of your options." "How can this happen, Mr. Eddington?" I asked. "Some of your teachers may suddenly begin to evaluate your work more critically," he said, smiling. "I assume you already have some kind of solution to this problem, right?" "Melinda, what happened between your mother and I was an accident, but it shouldn't ruin your career or anything else. Can we just—" I turned around and slammed his office door so hard it was probably heard in the gym. His eyes became huge. "Who the hell do you think you are?" I screamed. "What are you, Darth Vader? Is this some kind of warning that the Death Star is coming to destroy my home planet? Listen, dickhead, this is the 21st century. Nobody falls for these cheap theatrical tricks anymore. So, you won, my mother. I'm not as stupid as she must be. I got a B+ every year that I studied here, except for my first year. Do you know how I got my grades? I worked hard. Nobody gave me anything. If my grades suddenly started to drop, I would approach my teachers with a copy of my work and ask them to reconsider. They would have to show me what was wrong with my work and examples of those who got it right. Second, most of my teachers love me more than they love you, so they wouldn't support your nonsense. Third, you just made yourself an even bigger fool because of this." I took my new iPhone out of my pocket and replayed his threat to him. His eyes grew even larger, and he sank into a chair. "So now I have proof that you tried to keep me quiet, or you will try to convince the teachers to interfere with my grades. I guess it's illegal, isn't it?" He nodded his head. "So it's not enough that you've been some cheap Casanova here for the last few years. Now you're trying to blackmail kids to hide your connections. Who are you most afraid of, Russell?" I asked. "This is Mr. Eddington for you, Melinda," he wailed. "Mr. is a title or term of respect," I snorted. "I have neither for you, Russell. I hold your lousy little life and career in my hands. And you know what's the stupidest thing about all this?" He shook his head. "Before you interrupted my science lesson, I had already agreed with my mom not to tell Dad or your wife about this. So what are you most afraid of? Are you afraid that my dad will take revenge on you, or that you will lose your career? Think about it. I'm going back to class." I walked out into the hallway, still seething with anger, and ran into my favorite teacher, Mrs. Abra. "Are you okay, Melinda?" she asked, and suddenly everything became clear to me. Miss Abra was almost a legend in our school. All the boys and men were drooling over her. I remember more than once seeing a guy walking down a hallway and catching a glimpse of her, then crashing into a wall or door. About half the girls in school hated her. It was simply unfair. All these young women on the cusp of adulthood, like fruit on a vine that is just ripening. Most of them then realize that they have reached a point in their lives where time and gravity are their best friends. Then they encounter a woman like Miss Abra who makes them look like clumsy little boys. And when you look closely at her, your feeling of despair becomes even deeper. One of the things that most girls learn very early on is that we are all different. Each of us has something remarkable. We learn to emphasize our strengths and downplay our weaknesses. So, if you're a girl with an oily face, You know you need to wear cute clothes to highlight your body and tone down your face. You can also grow your hair longer and playfully style it to cover one eye or the other. If you don't have breasts, you probably have a nice butt or great legs, so you don't wear a bra and wear shorter skirts to highlight what you have. If you don't have a big butt or legs, that's not a problem. You wear low-cut tops and show off to girls. If you are a skinny model with no butt, breasts, or legs, then you will highlight your face. The point is, God gives us all something. The trick is to discover what you've been given and do something about it. Then Miss Abra comes to ruin everything. Let's start from the top. The woman is simply unfair. She has what I call reactive hair. Her hair is naturally light brown. She told me that when she was growing up, it was called mouse brown because it was so reserved and mousy. The women who had it did not stand out in any way. It wasn't a rich, nicely dark brown that could be called smoldering, nor was it even remotely light. In Miss Abra's case, her hair reacts to the sun. If there's a lot of sun, it will only take a few days for some of her hair to start turning lighter. It looks amazing. Everyone always thinks that her hair is highlighted. If she wears her hair in a ponytail or styles it so that parts of it are not exposed to the sun, those areas seem to darken, and before you know it, her hair has 2 or 3 very natural shades mixed together. Half the women I know spend a lot of money trying to achieve a look they don't even think about. Her hair goes down almost to her waist and flutters like the wings of a butterfly. And all that hair does is draw attention to her face. Her face is as beautiful as the rest. She has the bluest eyes. When she talks about math, the worst thing you can do is stare at her. I've heard many boys say that they looked at her and just went into a trance. Her eyes are so blue that you simply forget where you are. I wish she had a huge nose, but her nose is so small that it's like an ornament on her face. And she has the stupidest flaw. She has a bunch of tiny, almost symmetrical spots of freckles on her nose. She covers them with very light makeup because she hates them. Then when we walk outdoors and she doesn't wear makeup, all the guys see the freckles and fall in love with her even more. I absolutely hate her. At this point in history, we seem to be fascinated with lips. All over the world, women are getting collagen injections to make their lips thicker and fuller. Then there are women who are born with huge lips. Mrs. Abra has a small mouth, but it has the perfect Cupid's bow shape which makes it appear larger than it actually is. Her teeth are also very white, and she smiles often. Her smiles are quick, so if something makes her smile in class, the whole room seems warmer. While her head and face are prominent, her body is intimidating. All the parts just don't seem to add up to the whole. She doesn't have huge breasts, but that doesn't matter. In fact, last year at a senior pool party, I forgot my swimsuit and Mrs. Abra told me that since she was an escort only, I could take hers. She said it makes more sense for the students to have fun than the staff. I was sure I couldn't fill her top, then I noticed it was only a 34C top. At 18, last year I wore a 36C top. Her breasts are not big at all, but her chest and torso are so small that her average breast size appears large on her. Her waist is also small, only 23 inches, which makes her but look bigger than it is. And she runs every day like my dad, so her legs are intimidating. Mrs. Abra has a few quirks. This woman teaches math and science. She wears a lab coat all day, hiding her body. She also wears very long skirts and blouses that button up to the neck. She also wears those stupid safety glasses all the time, like she forgets she's wearing them. She just doesn't seem to realize how beautiful she is. The worst thing about her is that she is simply the sweetest person you could ever meet. She spends extra time with all of her students and really tries to make sure we understand how useful math and science are for our future careers. I think she has a weakness for shy, unassuming types. You often see her standing there, smiling at one of those socially awkward but very smart guys. But she doesn't tolerate any nonsense from the jocks on the team. She academically benched them more times than anyone cares to remember. When a coach stormed into her lab, angry that one of his players had dropped his GPA in her class to the point that he was on probation and unable to play, she refused to give him any leniency. She didn't care, she would give it to someone else. While we're on the subject of coach, he tried very hard to win over Mrs. Abra a couple of years ago. He was rejected outright. She made it clear to him that she was in no way interested in him. She went so far as to remove her name from the list of chaperones for any extracurricular activity in which he participated. Several other teachers also made their own attempts with her. She just didn't seem to want to date anyone. My mother once told me that she heard from one of the other science teachers that Mrs. Abra was once married. Abra was her last name after marriage. Her maiden name was Troy. Her husband was her childhood friend. He joined the army and died during training. The worst thing is that he didn't even get to serve his country. Although everyone who signs up makes us proud, for her, it seemed like the biggest waste of her life that her husband had died while training in a logistics procedure. He actually wanted to work for the same company as her father and believed that helping move equipment and resources for the army around the world would be a valuable experience. He also assured her that all he did was essentially warehouse work and receiving. He will stay as far away from bombs and bullets as possible. The soldier, who was not familiar with operating a forklift, crashed into a rack containing boxes of heavy shells. The entire rack collapsed. The boxes were so heavy that they bent the safety cage that protected the forklift operator. He escaped serious injury, but her husband was crushed under literally tons of metal. "Are you okay, Melinda?" she asked when she saw me leave Eddington's office. "Yes, ma'am, I'm fine," I said, "but he really gets on my nerves." "Trust me." She smiled, revealing her 2 white teeth. "I know this feeling. I never expected to see you leaving the principal's office. I hope you're not in trouble." "No, ma'am," I said, "but since you mentioned it, I really need some advice. You know, some women's wisdom from one generation to another, about fashion and style." "So, you need me to find someone to give you fashion advice?" she said. "Well, I guess we could ask Sandy. Do you know Mrs. Delacqua? She knows all about Parisian fashions and everything. She also watches all these TV shows about style and models. She has no idea how beautiful she is." She wanted to help me by asking another woman who was not as beautiful as her, Mrs. Abra, I said. "I wanted to get advice from you." "From me," she smiled, "but you are much more beautiful than me. I don't even know where to begin to advise you. Now, if you needed help with math, something you've never had, then you are the perfect person to help me," I said. "Okay," she smiled, "I will do my best, but you will have to help me too." "What do you need, ma'am?" I asked. "First and second year students don't sign up for a nature hike," she frowned. "They don't seem to find anything exciting about science. They tend to do everything on the computer. For them, running through the forest is not much fun." "Linda, you're very popular, and maybe if you let people know you'd be joining, I'd have more volunteers," she said shyly. God, this woman is crazy, I thought. All she had to do was take off her lab coat and those funny glasses and make an announcement, and every guy in school would show up. If the guys show up, the girls will come too. The problem was that the new students had not yet realized how attractive she was. "I won't just tell people," I said. "I will be there. Is it okay if I bring a friend?" "Of course," she said, smiling. "The more, the merrier. I need as many people as possible roaming the forest and bringing me samples." I went back to class that day, and when I got home after school, I ran into my mom again. "Hello, darling," she said with a smile. I looked at her as if she had gone crazy. I was 18 years old, and she greeted me at the door with a plate of milk and cookies. "Hi, Teresa," I said venomously. "I thought we agreed not to talk to each other." "Melinda, this is stupid," she said. "We are family. You were taken from my womb, you are a part of me, so we should at least try to get along." "Teresa, have you ever heard the expression 'you can't go home'?" I asked. She nodded her head in confusion. "What does this have to do with us?" she asked. "Well, you know how people are born in a certain area and grow up there, and then later become famous and move away? When they return home later, everything in the area has changed. Everything they thought was great is either destroyed or was never that great." "I still don't understand," she began. "Teresa, you said it yourself. I was taken from your womb, but after what I saw yesterday, I would never go back there. All your life, you've given me a set of rules to follow, but you don't follow them yourself. I have nothing more to learn from you. I don't respect you anymore, so there's no point in our communication. But, Melinda, we're not just a group of people working together in an office or a sports team, we're a family. We have to forgive each other when we make mistakes, she said. If you don't like my decision, we can always just tell Dad and let him decide if he wants to forgive you, I said. In my opinion, you cheated on a man who loves you so much that he does everything possible to make your life better. What has Eddington ever done for you? When you're sick, is he the one who sits by your bed, massaging your forehead? Is he the one who has supported you all these years? What did he even do for you to make you betray your husband? I asked. Nothing, she said. So, if we do it my way, I said, and I tell Dad what you did, not only will I still not talk to you, but you will also lose your husband and your daughter, right? She nodded. Teresa, just give up while you're behind, I said. I can't believe the girl I raised is so unforgiving, she said, her voice trembling and tears rolling down her cheeks. Teresa, stop crying, I said. You said it yourself yesterday. I'm Daddy's daughter. I dealt with you gently. If you were someone else, if the person who hurt my dad was someone I didn't love, I would have ruined his life. You got off easy. If you don't do anything stupid again, you can stay married to him. But of course, if someone else doesn't know about what you did, if I catch you again, even with someone else, it won't be pretty. I stayed in my room until Dad came home. Then I went downstairs and had dinner with him. Dad relaxed for a while after dinner, and then I asked him if he wanted to go for a walk or a light jog. Just as we were getting ready to leave, my mom asked if she could come with us. You don't like to run, I said, smiling at her. You can ride your old bike. She smiled. So, we could all be together. My bike has a flat tire, I said, but if you really want to, listen to me talk about school events and try to convince Dad to come to some of them, that's fine. Maybe since you're there, we can talk about yesterday too. Well, if my bike has a flat tire, there's no way I can go with you, she suddenly said. My 5th place is too fat to run. I love your 5th place, honey, my dad said. He kissed her, and I wanted to vomit. My mom smiled at me after he kissed her and patted her 5th place. I think she considered it a victory. When my dad got up to change into his gym clothes, she smiled at me. See, Melinda? He wasn't hurt, he still loves me just as much. And believe it or not, I still love him too. I would never hurt him, he's the man I intend to spend the rest of my life with. All I wanted was a little excitement. It will be very exciting when he divorces your cheating 5th place, I said, smiling at her. She just shook her head and went to the kitchen to clean. When Dad and I ran, we talked. He was telling me about some problems at work and what he wanted to do with his Mustang. I told him about the post-harvest dance and the scientific expedition for Mrs. Abra. I nudged him a little, and he agreed to accompany me. When he told me that he would make my mom come too, I told him that I had already asked her and she had other plans. So when Saturday came, Dad and I got up early and grabbed breakfast on the go. We were still eating it when Mrs. Abra pulled up in her car. She had one of those new Pontiacs, a reissue of the classic GTO. The car came out a few years ago and wasn't as big of a hit as GM expected. It was too similar to the G6 and G8, and while the performance was great, it didn't look like what muscle car enthusiasts wanted. My dad immediately jumped out of his Mustang and slowly walked around the car. He looked at everything, the wheels, brakes, dual exhaust pipes, and then leaned back to look at the body lines. Mrs. Abra got out of the car and walked towards me. This is my dad, I said. He's a car fan, I noticed. She said, Dad, come meet my teacher. I shouted. You don't have to worry about anything, your car is much more powerful no matter what you're trying to figure out. As soon as I called him, a van with a bunch of guys pulled up. Coach Cleats and several guys from the team got out and started looking around. Hi, my dad said shyly, extending his hand. I'm Jim Carson, I'm Keith's dad. Elena, she said. She shook his hand warmly and looked into his eyes. My dad looked away. I noticed that she tried to hold his hand for a split second longer than she should have. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Can I ask? My dad started, before Coach Cleet ran up to us. "Hello, Beauty," he said. "I got my guys to come help with your problem." More and more cars pulled up, and kids got out of them. Some brought their parents or younger siblings. "Well, I don't see how they can help by playing football," she said. "And if they don't want to be here, then they shouldn't. I need water and soil samples. I also need to know where they came from. I need leaves and plant samples. If they mess it up, I'll have to start over." "They can handle it, Beauty," he said. "And you and I can go look for something together." "See you later, Elena," my dad said. "Elena, huh?" Coach Cleet said. "Well, Elena, let's get started." "My name is Mrs. Abra, Coach," she said. "I don't like being called pretty, and we're not on friendly terms. I really don't understand why you came today, so I would really appreciate it if you could keep an eye on your boys so they don't trample on the vegetation while we're here. The goal is to study nature, not destroy it." The coach turned red and looked ready to explode when one of his guys in the background whispered, "Ooh, frozen." I shook my head and followed Mrs. Abra. The morning and early afternoon were very eventful. I naturally teamed up with my dad, and we went through all the forests finding what we were assigned to find. Mrs. Abra was very excited and often asked us where we got a particular sample and followed us around to see it for herself. It was interesting to watch her and my dad being together. I could see that if given the chance, they would work together. But the funny thing was that they were almost never alone. Many mothers and their sons or daughters tried to talk to my dad at the same time. Many men tried to approach Mrs. Abra. Finally, late in the afternoon, the school bus driver arrived in a van to take all the samples back to the school. Miss Abra thanked everyone and told them to stop. She told us that the day was a success and that the school science program thanked us all. Everyone got into their cars and left. I was ready to go too. I needed to think seriously. In the morning, I saw Russell Eddington appear, but he didn't stay long. I think when he saw me and my father, he left. I also saw my mother's car. I wasn't sure if she was there to see Eddington or to find out what I was doing, but she drove past and continued on her way. Perhaps it was a coincidence. I had several problems to solve, and at the same time, I was starving, Jim, Miss Abra said as we got into the car. "First of all, I want to thank you for coming. You and Melinda were my best lab assistants today. And secondly, just before everyone came, you were going to ask me something, weren't you?" My father looked at her shyly, and she smiled suddenly. I wasn't so hungry anymore. Things might not be as bad as I thought after all. "Come on, Dad, invite her to come and eat with us," I thought. "It's something personal," my father said shyly. "Jim, you spent Saturday digging in the dirt for me," she said. "So ask me." "Could you, show me," he began. I kind of thought my dad was above it, but my mom sure as hell wasn't. Mrs. Abra's eyes also narrowed, but my father continued to rapidly plunge into disaster. "I'd really like to see," he continued, "the engine in that GTO. It is expected to be a 5.7L V8 engine. This is the same engine that was in the Corvette that year. I am curious, why does it only produce 350 horsepower? What year is this, because the 04 had 350 horsepower, and the 06 had 400. While both are very respectable, you'd think with such a larger engine, you'd get more out of it. I mean, my Mustang is only 5.0L and it produces 462 horsepower without forced air, and I have no idea what you're talking about," she laughed. "But you can look at it all you want." She was still smiling at him and shaking her head as she got into the car and opened the hood. Dad picked it up, put the support in place, and began to look at what the guys were looking at. Then, Mrs. Abra got out of the car and stood next to him. Unfortunately, Coach Kitts also jumped off the bus and headed to the car. "What's wrong with your car, but hell, Miss Abra?" he asked angrily. "Nothing," she said. "Do you have somewhere to stay?" "No, I'm alone tonight," he said. "So what are we looking at?" "It's a motor, isn't it? From here, I can see what's wrong with him. You need to have your carburetor repaired. Maybe we can get away with just cleaning it. I think we have the fluid we need on the bus." This engine doesn't have a carburetor," my father said. "It's fuel injection." Exactly, said Coach Kitts. I was going to pour starting fluid into the injector. Well, I'll let you guys continue. If you can't fix it, call me. You still have my number, right? Yes, I have your number, Miss Abra said sarcastically. She turned back to look at the engine with my dad as Frozen again came from the bus to a burst of laughter. Dad, eat, I said. A few minutes later, we said goodbye to Miss Abra and headed home. When we returned home because it was Saturday, my mother had not prepared dinner. When we entered, she looked at us hesitantly. She walked up to Dad, hugged him, and then looked at me. I kept a neutral expression. Melinda, today is Saturday, dear. Don't you have a date or something? She asked. Mom, you know Dean and I went out last night, I said. And we'll probably figure something out for tomorrow afternoon. But on Saturday night, he has to help his father clean the church. Remember, I helped too, just to be close to Dean. But his mother annoyed me. Why do moms always create problems? Mom immediately went into a defensive position. I wasn't trying to cause trouble, honey, she said. I was just wondering if you were busy with something. You're a beautiful girl, you should enjoy life. This is your last year at school. You'll have to get serious about your studies next year if you want to get into a good law school. You work hard, and I want you to be able to rest well too. Mom, life is not always about fun. I had a great time bonding with my dad today. It was a lot of fun, and we also helped one of my teachers, like you said. I'm going away to college next year, so I want to spend as much time as possible with my dad. Besides, didn't you always tell me that family comes first? And you also told me that sometimes you need to do like Tammy Wynette and stand by your man. I know it's bad that Dean is stuck helping at the church. Neither of us is really religious, but his parents are into it. He doesn't want to offend them, so we go along with it. Since I'm in a relationship with him, I have to follow the program. Remember you taught me to put my relationships first? She turned pale when I threw her own words back at her. I like the way you phrase it, Mom, I said. Girls who get involved with many guys are usually left without one of their own. She looked like she had been punched in the stomach. Well, I didn't cook dinner, she said, changing the subject. I was thinking that if you were going out, maybe your dad and I would just order pizza and watch pay TV and see what happens. That sounds good, I said. I grabbed my dad's hand and pulled him out of the kitchen. I'll order pizza, Dad. You turn on the big screen and find us a movie. Please don't choose one of those sappy love stories that end tragically when one of the lovers dies or cheats. When Dad came to the door a short time later to pick up the pizza from the delivery guy, he ended up talking about his Mustang with him. My mother took this opportunity to speak again. It would be nice if you would let me spend the evening alone with your dad, she said plaintively. How can I fix the situation if you never leave us alone? I said caustically. 3 things. 1, you need to get yourself tested for STDs before you even dream of touching him again. Number 2, I saw you driving past the park at the same time as Lover, or shortly after. If I find out you've spoken to him, all bets are off. And 3, I thought we shouldn't be talking to each other. I had barely finished the last sentence when Dad put the pizza in front of us. I'll get drinks for all of us, he said. Mom and I smiled and nodded our heads. She even reached out and gently patted my shoulder. I'm sure my dad didn't notice anything. He was pretty calm unless someone was threatening his family or talking about his car. As soon as he went into the kitchen, we were at each other's throats again. If you ever touch me again, you'll be divorced before you can pull your hand away, I snapped. Melinda, you need to give me a chance to make peace. I'm not your enemy. I know you and your father decided that you would be a lawyer, but you treat me like I'm a criminal. Even criminals are innocent until proven guilty, she said. Mom, you had an agreement, let's call it a contract, with Dad. Part of this agreement required you to be faithful to him, didn't it? I asked. But she muttered, no. But, I said. Didn't that require loyalty and trust? Yes, she said. You broke it, I said. We don't need any proof because I was there. I caught you red-faced and red-handed. Is this also true? Yes, she spat. But can I make amends for what I did? When someone steals something, they give it back, apologize, and then move on. Mom, you're either crazy or stuck at 3 years old, I said. When someone robs a bank, even if he returns the money, he goes to jail. In that case, how can you compensate for the damage? Once again, I treat you much better than you deserve. I had to tell Dad everything. You could live with Grandma again right now, and Mom, you won't stay in the house. I know this. Most people think the house goes to the woman. Dad paid the mortgage himself, you're not even listed on it. In most cases, the house actually goes to the parent and child. Since I'll be off to college soon, I might add that if Dad pays for it, the judge will find me living in this house until I graduate. Make no mistake, Teresa, I am much older than the age when any judge can ask my opinion, and there is no doubt which parent I would prefer to live with. I smiled at her. So, I see that you'll live with your grandmother, and you know that she'll be very angry with you when she finds out why you got divorced. Dad will probably waive child support and your half of my school expenses since you can't afford it, even if you went back to damn Eddington. I forgot that you can't do this because in the 3 days that you were gone, he already got a younger and prettier secretary. So, at 38, you are left without any skills except those you may have behind you. You're living in your mom's basement with debt piling up. I'm sure Dad won't let me get kicked out of school for this. You don't pay your share, and he probably won't keep you on child support. Your lawyer will likely negotiate the deal. Dad doesn't have to pay you child support in exchange for you not paying child support and him paying for all my college expenses. Does this seem fair to you? No, she said loudly. I would have gone broke. I don't have any skills. I dropped out of college to have a child who no longer values me. I made one mistake. Why should I lose my home, my family, my marriage, and my daughter for one mistake? Mom, forgetting to add bleach is a mistake. Having a night with another man in Dad's bed is a criminal offense, I said. My facial features were tense when I spoke to her, acid dripped from my words. As far as I understand, Dad, I fell silent when he entered the room with a tray. He placed a tall, fluted glass of white wine in front of his mother. He also had a bottle of wild cherry Pepsi and a dose of EIS Amber in front of me. For himself, he sat down on the sofa at the far end, Mom in the middle, and me at the opposite end. I stood up to grab the cable remote control. When I returned to the couch, I leaned over and hugged my mother. This shocked the hell out of her after the conversation she had just had. Then, I squeezed between them and put my feet on the coffee table as we sat down to watch the movie. I spent Sunday morning thinking about my problem. I found it strange that an 18-year-old girl who was still a virgin was trying to teach her almost 40-year-old mother a moral lesson. All my life, my father protected me, and this time I had to protect him. I've seen enough of my friends go through their parents' divorce to know that it's usually the parent who got cheated on who gets the worst of it. When Daniel's father cheated on her mother with his secretary, they divorced. Her mother received a house and a monthly check, but she became withdrawn and depressed. She started drinking and became a different woman. This also affected Danielle. Her mother's self-esteem and confidence were destroyed. Meanwhile, her father married his secretary, got her pregnant, started his new family with a woman half his age, and moved on with his life. Somehow, the money he had to pay Danielle's mother was not enough for the pain he caused her. She will also only receive child support for 5 years. What do you think of our first part of the story today? In my opinion, the man did the right thing to reveal all the cards. Maybe the fact that he did it publicly was not super, but still it was better than he would not have said anything at all. What do you think? Write in the comments. See you in the next video.